Our nephew Isaac is 15 years old, and he is absolutely brilliant, very smart. He's athletic. He's a great person to talk to. He's turned into just a wonderful, brilliant young man. But when he was about 2 or 3, we never would have guessed that he would have gotten through this terrible stage. He was the grumpiest kid you ever would have met. He would wake up in the morning whining and crying, and he would go to bed at night whining and crying, with very few moments of relief in between. And one time, him and his family, who live in Peterborough, took a trip to visit Terrence's parents in Fredericton. And Jyoti, Isaac's mom, was trying to get the 3 kids to bed and was struggling with Isaac's younger brother. And so I thought I would help out. And so I was trying to, keep Isaac away from his mom, trying to help, get him ready for bed. And at one point he just said, "I want to go home." And I said, "Well, Isaac, you are home." And he said, "No, I want to go home to Peterborough." And anyway, he ended up, being with his mom and getting the care he wanted in the beginning, and I went off and went to bed or something. But I think what Isaac expressed in that moment is that when we're out of sorts, when things aren't the way we want them to be, we all want to go back to that place of comfort, that place of belonging. We want to go home, to a place that makes us feel safe. And over the last year, I think there's a lot of things we've had to look at with fresh eyes, but our homes are one of those places we've really had to consider with fresh eyes. As we've been told to stay home more than ever, and we've started to look around our homes and to think about, what are our homes like? What are these places that we spend so much time in? What are they like, and what do they mean to us? One area of business that has definitely not suffered over the last year has been home renovations, interior design, all that realm. I think as people are spending more time in their homes, they're starting to look around and think of, how can we make this better? What do we need to change? And so people are pulling out walls and buying new furniture and doing all sorts of crazy things to their homes. Some of us here may have been in the same home for decades, while others, maybe it's only been weeks or months that we've been where we're living. For some of us in our community, home is a constantly shifting notion. There are people who are always moving, who are never quite settled. So the notion of home, and I think the memories that we attach to home, are very different from person to person. But across the board, we all agree that home is really important, and it's so important to have a safe place that makes us comfortable. When Jesus came onto the scene and started his ministry, he called people to follow him. He called his disciples to follow him. We know that the 12 left their homes to wander all over the countryside, and they weren't the only ones. There would be crowds that would follow Jesus. From time to time, these crowds would swell into huge gatherings, and many of them, for a period of time, would leave their homes, would often leave their only sources of income, and go and follow Jesus. And Jesus tended to encourage this sense of urgency around following him. It was like you had to do it now. And even when there's people that came up to him with excuses about why they could not follow him right now, one young man came up to him and said, "Well, I have to go and bury my father." And Jesus, in probably one of his last pastoral moments in the Bible, says, "Let the dead bury their own dead. If you want to come and follow me, you have to do it now." All of this to say that there's a sense of being without a place to call home, which was an essential part of following Jesus. Jesus himself didn't even seem to have a true home. When we think about, where's Jesus from? Well, is he from Bethlehem? Is he from Nazareth? There seems to be some ambiguity there. Where exactly did Jesus belong himself? It's complicated. In Matthew 8:20, Jesus even comments about his own homelessness when he says, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." And he really lived this out. Moments after he said that verse, Jesus ended up crawling into a boat and falling asleep in a boat. So the fact that Jesus had no place to call home was really a part of his ministry and a part of the ministry of all those who followed him. Well, this morning's gospel reading is taken from a big talk that Jesus had with the disciples when they're gathered in the upper room, moments before Jesus' crucifixion. And Jesus, in this talk, gives his disciples one last lesson on home. He's preparing his disciples for a time when they will have no one to follow. And Jesus, in this passage, invites them to a new home. Not heaven with its mansions, but a home in the love of Jesus, which comes from the love of the Father. Last week, Terrence talked about how Jesus tells his disciples to graft themselves onto him, like branches grafted onto a vine. Well, in this week's gospel, Jesus invites his disciples to come and abide in his love, to come and live in his love. John 15:9-11 says, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete." Now, there are other verses in this passage that I read before, but I think what really stands out and what I couldn't seem to move past this week is this question of, what does it mean to abide in the love of Jesus? What does it mean to abide in the love of Jesus? Frederick Bruner translates these verses in this way. He says, "Just as much as the Father loved me, that's how much I have loved you. Make your home in this special love of mine and relax." Bruner says that Jesus invites us to make ourselves at home in his love for us, which is a love that is just as large as his Father's love for him. So Jesus is saying that he wants us to be at home in his love, a love that he has gotten from the Father. And the same amount of love that the Father has for the Son, that's how much love Jesus has for us. And it's quite incredible to hear Jesus pour out his heart, to listen to him express this one great desire that he has for his disciples, and in fact that he has for all of us. And that is for us to be loved. He wants them to know that they will not be rootless or lost, but can have a home in him. After all their wanderings, their home can be in him. Graft yourself onto me. Abide in my love. These words show us Jesus' longing to maintain a closeness with us, a closeness with his disciples, for this connection to not be lost just because there's a physical separation. I think our greatest hope in life, our greatest hopes are often tied with having a sense of belonging, with being at home somewhere, of being where we're supposed to be, doing what we're supposed to do. And for that feeling to be satisfied, we often need more than a particular geographical location. Friends, loved ones, a place to be ourselves, those are often at the heart of what we are truly longing for, what we're truly looking for when we say that we want to be home. Duo Dickinson once said, "If you don't like yourself, your house will not make you like yourself better. If your family is dysfunctional, a new home will not put it together. Any renovating you attempt as a psychological bomb is destined to fail." Jesus' invitation to make ourselves at home in his love is an invitation to reconsider how we look at where we belong. Belonging in him, finding our sense of self in him, and finding our commitment and our contentment in him. That's what Jesus is asking us and inviting us into. If we think back to the very beginning of the story of our relationship with God, if we look back into the book of Genesis, we see humanity in the beginning had this full access to God. we hear of Adam and Eve walking with God in the garden. There's a full sense of love and belonging. But because of sin, because of wanting to do without God as sole provider, they had to go and find a new home. And in many ways, I think we've been looking to get back to the joy and peace of the garden ever since. Something in us yearns to be loved, yearns to be in the best place for us. Or as people have been saying lately, we yearn to live our best lives, whatever that means. And while we can't go back to the garden days, we're invited to make our home in the love of Jesus. This home is one that Jesus builds out of the Father's love, and it's filled with the love of Jesus himself. It's where there's continual access to God, to his love and strength, and more importantly, where there's an eternal sense of belonging. This is where we are meant to be, making our home in the love of Jesus, grafting ourselves onto his vine. It's a completely new way of looking at our relationship with God and a completely new way of looking at who we are ourselves. The closeness Jesus has with the Father is what he wants us to have with him. He wants us to come into his house, to kick off our shoes and go relax by the fire. He wants us to find a sense of peace, of belonging, and of joy in the loving relationship we have with him. It all sounds so wonderful, doesn't it? But at times I think we struggle with this invitation. A lot of this struggle, I think, has to do with trust. We're not quite sure all the time about this Jesus who wants us into his home. Because I think that we know once we sit down on his couch, he'll be able to see everything inside of us, the good, the bad, the shameful. So rather than completely accept his invitation, sometimes I think we hold back. We hang out in the doorway. We want to make small chat instead. Or maybe instead of completely moving in, we want to just bring in a couple boxes at a time. Maybe we just want to go for visits, selectively showing him our hearts instead of opening up completely. Tish Harrison Warren, in her book on prayer in the night, talks about how she tends to have two prevalent questions for God. These are, who are you, and do you love me? And I think our whole lives of faith boil down to how we answer these two questions. Who are you, God? Can I trust you? And do you love me? Do we see this? Do you love me even in the hard times? Do you love me even when I do things wrong? And so as I was looking at this passage this week, I kept asking myself, what does it look like to abide in the love of Jesus? What does it look like to make ourselves at home in that love? And what is it that keeps us from going in and fully moving into that love? And as I was considering that, I didn't get any wonderful, crystal clear answers, because I think it takes a lifetime to really work through those things. I think it'll take me a lifetime to fully let go of my impulse to control and to hold back and fully trust God. But when I was thinking of these questions, I did get snapshots of what this love is like, what this home Jesus is offering is like. One snapshot comes padding into our room most mornings at 2 o'clock in the morning. Naomi still wakes up most nights, I'd say. And usually I bring her back into her room and get her back to sleep. But on some nights when I'm really tired, I'll just pull her up over the side and plop her in between Terrence and I. And this is not the most restful solution for Terrence and I. He'll usually end up with a foot in his ribs and I get a hand in my face, something like that. But occasionally when she's there in between us, I'll wake up in the night and look over and see her peaceful, resting face, just completely at rest, her little life in complete contentment. And in those moments, I catch a glimpse of how Jesus would like us to be with him, for how Jesus would like us to rest in his love, trusting, at peace, soaking it all in, feeling his joy. And once we are on the receiving end of that love, I think then we become ready to share it with others. Frederick Bruner says that real love, if we admit it, doesn't come easily. The inhaling of an undeserved divine love for ourselves, received by usually hesitating but eager trust, and the exhaling of our all too human but still well-intended love for others. This is the breathing exercises that all disciples try to practice every day. Trust, breathe in, have a heart, breathe out. And the reason Jesus so wants us to be at home in his love is for our own joy. By trusting him, by breathing in that love, by accepting that love, by sharing that love with others, by having a heart, breathing out, we open our lives to a very special kind of joy. It's not quite like walking with God in the cool of the garden, but I think it's as close as we can get. Jean-Pierre de Caussade, in his book, The Sacrament of the Present Moment, wrote that only God's purpose can satisfy your longing and leave you nothing to wish for. Only God's purpose, that breathing in and breathing out, can satisfy your longing and leave you nothing to wish for. Last weekend, as many of you know, I took a refreshing couple of nights away from everybody and everything. And I struggled at first with the decision to take this risk. It felt kind of selfish. But as Terence reminds me, when I'm tired, I get grumpy. And when I'm grumpy, nobody's happy. So I knew I needed to take a rest. And as confirmation almost of this, the day before I left, I went to the dentist. And I was in the dentist's chair, and she said, "Oh, you're grinding your teeth a lot, aren't you?" Which is a sure sign that I'm stressed out and need a break. So everything was telling me to take this break. But I still thought, oh, maybe I should pack some books, and maybe I'll bring a commentary so I can work on my sermon. And those thoughts kept going through my head. But the next day, the day I was leaving, God reminded me of a lesson I thought I'd learned a long time ago. I'm not the one doing the real work. He is. I'm not indispensable. He is. He can accomplish all things, and he's not relying on me to do it. This, for me, was an open invitation to trust him, to rely on his love and his care, to take heart, and to depend on his strength, which, of course, I think all these things are part of what Jesus is inviting us to make our home in his love. And just to really drive this theme home, these are the words I read in the commentary on Monday, not when I was away, but on Monday when I started working on my sermon. I read these words. It says, Jesus wants our joy, not our heaviness, our peace and relaxation, which are the clearest accompaniments of joy, not our grinding of teeth. I thought, okay, God, I got it. So I think this invitation to come and find a home in Jesus, to be at home in his love, to stop our grinding of teeth, is an invitation to come and relax, to not see God as someone who's trying to get us to constantly change who we are or do something more or be more, but to relax into who Jesus is and relax into his love. We are accepted now. We are loved now. It's as simple as a toddler plopping herself down between two loving parents. We just need to spend time with Jesus, to open the lines of communication, open the door to trust, to make ourselves vulnerable, to open our hearts and our lives to Jesus, to bring our moments of hurt and unbelonging to him. And all this is what we do in prayer. Tish Harrison Warren writes, prayer itself is therefore a willingness to enter into ambiguity and vulnerability. But it is the ambiguity and vulnerability of finding ourselves loved and having to learn again and again how to receive that love and to trust it to remain true. For some of us, it's hard to believe we're loved because we think or have been told that we are unlovable. Others have heard that God loves us so many times it's grown stale. It's old news. Our grandmother loves us too. It's nice, but it's certainly not the orientating fact of our life. It's not what is holding us together on our worst day. She says, one reason to pray is so that the love of God might cease to be a spent and musty idea and instead become our light, the illumination by which we see everything. So no matter what or where home is to you, whether it's Fredericton or Peterborough or St. John or Belgium, no matter how much or how little we feel that we belong, we are invited to come and trust in Jesus, to make a home in his special and unique and illuminating kind of love, and to relax.